Peace and blessings. This is Unplug 'em. Almighty Creator, I am that I am. Guide my tongue, guide my heart, guide my mind to be in alignment with your will. Cause me to decrease and let you increase. Let you be seen and me be unseen. Did you know that rappers were used and have been used for some time and are still used to bring in the drugs in our community? This is not a new phenomenon. And some of the MCs today make so much allusion to it in their rap that there is a new category of rap alongside gangster rap. You have dope boy rap. Uh, Detroit, Michigan is a city that is well known for its participation in the drug game, and some of the rappers who have come out from Detroit as of late, post Eminem, have been quite representative of the dope boy rap. So much so that Jeezy has given the nod to and helped to produce, promote, and sign some of those acts. It's a very popular thing in the hood, as a matter of fact. But it's not a new phenomenon. So we don't want to pick on the new school, because all the new school can do is what the old school taught them to. So we want to examine some things that have really gone on since the root of hip-hop. And I know some of us fantasize and romanticize about hip-hop music being something divinely given to us from out of our African heritage, coming from the griot and the talking drum. And there is some truth to that. However, it's not all good. And that's seldom dealt with in the right way. You have people like Elder C.L. Lewis, who tried to bring some things to light about hip-hop, and he did. However, it's always more effective when someone who's really knowledgeable about a particular thing speaks upon it. And it's a little less effective when we know someone comes from the outside looking in. And we tend to look at those things more skeptically. So what I wish to do is to bring to you some things that perhaps you've not heard. Some things that may indeed be the opposite of what you've heard from Black Dot and Professor Griff's take on hip-hop music and its origins. And even more surprising will probably be that we're going to deal with one of the MCs that has all but received godhood status in hip-hop history and among purists like myself and underground hip-hop heads. And as I was so led to deal with a lot of people's favorite rapper, Tupac, and the idolatry of him, and to try to break that chain, in this series, Break Every Chain, I'm going to deal with my favorite rapper, as it was for years and years, and that would be Rakim. And it was due to Rakim and Big Daddy Kane and the other artists from that era who were involved in the 5% Nation of Islam that I chose for myself. The first religious institution that I joined out of my own will and power was the Nation of Islam when I was 18 years old. And I was not unlike a lot of brothers who was exposed to those teachings by way of hip-hop music. And we saw it as an all-good thing. It was bringing knowledge of self, some sense of culture and pride and self-awareness where there was none. And that may be a case of what the devil meant for bad, God turns around for good. But let's show that the devil did indeed mean it for bad. And I started off saying what I said about a lot of artists being used to bring dope into the hood, because that itself, that concept goes back to COINTELPRO, which was used to infiltrate community organizations like the Black Panthers and others. The Crips were once a community organization, so were the Bloods, and a lot of your other notorious gangs that are now known primarily for violence and drugs. They didn't start off that way. And it's part of the program of the powers that be, who we like to call the blanket term the Illuminati, to use these avenues, these well-trusted avenues, to get deeply entrenched into the hood and to disseminate the poison, the most poisonous product of drugs. And it's also notable to insert again that Aleister Crowley did go to Detroit in 1915 and 1919. And he went specifically to Park Davis Research Laboratory, which is located off the riverfront. It's now the Riverfront Hotel. And that was the #1 pharmaceutical research laboratory in the nation and arguably in the world at the time. And so the home of drugs was originally Detroit, and that was the industry that fueled the city prior to the automotive industry, which we can also connect to the fallen angels, but we know we can connect the drug gang to the fallen angels, and that's Pharmacon, which is why Detroit is represented iconically by the Spirit of Detroit statue. But now let's shift from Detroit to New York. And big up to Brother Ron and the BX, Brother Minister of Yah, sent divinely and timely. I will be introducing you guys to him. He has some good messages that the Lord has imparted upon him that we meant to get on here a few days ago, but everything in divine time. And it was by no coincidence that we had divine appointment one with another. It was through my calling out to the Most High and saying, well, Lord, if I'm heavyweight jamming for real, if I'm not delusional, yeah, I'm hearing from Ireland, I'm hearing from Australia, I'm hearing from all sorts of places. I said, but until I hear from the fastest place in this seat of Babylon, the fastest city on planet Earth, arguably, I'm not going to feel like I'm doing nothing. And I said that in jest to the Most High, but it just goes to show you how he hears the prayers and the desires of the heart of his servant. And the very next day, I received a correspondence from Brother Ron. And from that day forth, we formed a friendship and a camaraderie as soldiers in the same army, stationed in different places, but serving, of course, the same Commander-in-Chief, Yahshua HaMashiach, by the will of the Most High, Yah, Ahaya. So right now we're going to look at reptilians and Zulus, Rakim, Islam, and the Dyin of Dyiana. And if you know anything about your Islam, the wise and civilized brothers that study Islam will say, when they say that they own their square, which is a Masonic term, so is square business, which I say all the time. Without any affiliation to the Masonry, we are indoctrinated with a lot of things that they say and do. If you say watch your back, you're using a Masonic term. But brothers will say that they own their Dyin, and that means that you're on your Islamic square, on your job, studying, doing the things you're supposed to do. However, we find that the word Dyin itself betrays the very roots and origins of Islam as a true religion of Abraham, and I will show and prove that it is. That was tainted. Just as we can look at what we now view as the religion of Judaism and find many things that were inserted by the pagans that the Jews lived in and around. Throughout the Old Testament, you find evidence of this, and it's one reason why Yeshua had to come, because he had to perfect. He said he came not to take away the law, but to fulfill it. And that meant that it had not been fulfilled, even with all the great prophets that came before him. So there was a perfection that had to be done, and a way that tradition and religion had to be done away with, because the Israelites had become too steeped in the tradition and the religion and had thought themselves too high. They had begun to become respecters of themselves. And this is what we have to be cautious of. When you, by your bloodline, consider yourself to be greater than others, you are illuminous by default, because it is written that Yah is no respecter of persons. So we have to do our due diligence to really be sure of what makes one chosen, what makes one, Matthew 24 and 24, elect. For it is written that if it were possible in these last days and times, the tricks of the enemy, not paraphrasing, if it were possible, would deceive the very elect. So no matter what your bloodline may be or may not be, as the case may be, Revelations 2 and 9 says that there would be a people among us who would call themselves Jews, but they would not be. They would truly be of the synagogue of Satan. Who are those people and where are they? So we have to be cautious not to allow ourselves to fall into any form of elitism. It's as bad as prejudice. It's the polar opposite end of the same negative emotion, a pride. So let's look a little bit inside of this thing. And, why do I say that Islam is an Abrahamic religion? Well, the Bible says so. if Islam stems from Ishmael, and if a person wants to challenge that, all you have to do is study something from within to get a better understanding of it. To stand outside of it and point fingers is the exercise of ignorance. But if we look at the words for peace in both languages, salam and shalom have the exact same meaning and root. If we look at the name for God, which is the name for God in Arabic, even if you are a Christian person who lives in an Arabic nation, you will call God Allah. And Allah is the exact same word as Elo, which is permissible as the short form of Elohim, Elohim being plural, and El Elo being singular. So if El Elo is permissible as a Hebrew word, then so is El Allah, because they are exactly the same word, with the older vowel, A, actually being used in the so-called religion of Islam. And I say so-called because all of these things were divided from one original source. We know that Aramaic is the true root from which we get Arabic and Hebrew. And the Hebrew that many of us have been taught in schools and that rabbis will teach you today is Yiddish and not the original form Hebrew. Even a lightweight jam study of the language will show a layperson. Just like in English, you have modern English, you have Old English, and you have Middle English. You have the same thing in Hebrew. And most of us are taught modern Hebrew, which is not the old Hebrew of the prophets of old. And the differences are glaring when one does even the slightest study of such a thing. So now, how does all of this relate to Rakim, Islam, and the Dyin of Diana? Well, the Queen of Heaven, as Isis in Egypt, becomes Diana of the Greco-Roman pantheon. Isis is Diana, and that is the goddess, or the demon spirit, if you will, that masquerades as the Madonna, also for Catholicism. And again, we are not indicting, demonizing, or villainizing anyone's particular belief system. But what we are attempting to do is take those things that are done in the dark and bring them to the light. And we are also attempting to make the crooked things straight by the will of the Creator, which it is His charge to make the crooked things straight. And if we are little examples of Him, if we are to be in His example and in His likeness, then we must do things like Him. So we're going to set some crooked things straight, and we're going to break people of some bondages. The bondage of idolatry and idolism, they go hand in hand. People idolize John Wayne. People idolize Elvis. People idolize Madonna, like Dyin or Diana. The false queen of heaven, Isis, which is Sasha. Fierce, backwards is the Sasha is Isis. That's Isis. And the fierce is fire. But the idolatry that hip-hop has brought to a community that is starving for heroes, starving for male role models, that idolatry has to be broken through. Because until we see things the way that they really are, not the way that we want to see them in fantasy, or the way we would like to see them due to our need for self-esteem, more pride. I'm black and I'm proud. James Brown even was an idol. We need to be able to see things clearly. And we cannot clearly see the enemy if we continually see those who are placed in front of us, sometimes as controlled opposition to the elite, by the elite. And so when I exposed Tupac, a few butts got burnt, but not many. It's only in the interest of fairness that I go ahead and expose some things that the Most High showed me concerning my favorite lyricist, in my opinion, the best, the dopest MC of all time, Rakim. And we're going to look at some things that might have made him so quick of tongue and so deep in thought and so able to take your mind through various planes of existence with his lyrics. And we're also going to look at his relationship to Professor Griff. Because I recall, as a hip-hop head who read everything that there was to read concerning the art form I was learning, I recall that we were told that Professor Griff and Rakim were brothers. And I also recall doing a little due diligence when asked, well, how could this be? And people said, well, look at them, they look alike. I said, okay, granted. Then they said, well, look at their last names. Rakim's name is William Griffin. Look on the back of, or inside of your covers, Paid in Full album, or your Follow the Leader album, and you will see W. Griffin. And that is indeed Rakim's given name before he changed his name to his alter ego, his other personality, the Sasha Fierce that he would become, Ra, sun god Kim of Kemet, or Egypt. So now let's look at some things, and we're going to heavyweight jam. Now, a good friend of mine who was Gods and Earth, and then he switched over to the Moorish Temple in Detroit, my main man, DJ Asiatic, we talked about these things, and he used to go to the Universal Councils and different things of that nature. He would go from Medina to Mecca, from Mecca to Medina, from time and time again, and meet in fellowship with the wise and civilized brothers. And so he wasn't he wasn't new to this, he wasn't new to the rodeo, and he was not the dullest bulb in the lamp. And we would have deep conversations about these things, and he had a hold of Professor Griff's number, which is not hard to get if you watch videos. Professor Griff would throw his number out there the same way I throw mine. And Professor Griff, for those who don't know, was the information, he was called the Minister of Information in the group Public Enemy, which, the more we look at it, was also a group that was born out of the need to create controlled opposition. When we look at Chuck D, who was the leader of the group, and his affiliation now with CNN and major news networks, doing his part to be a correspondent for them, and then the other rumors and things that I'm sure many of you have heard concerning him and his persuasion. And then we look at Flavor Flav, who was the other key member of the group, and we see the things that he became involved in subsequently. Those of us who understand MK Ultra and who know the story of Huey P. Newton can make a direct relationship between mind control and those individuals, those heroes, quote unquote, that were set up before us, and how they were taken out, taken down in front of our eyes, because that does something to the psyche. We watched them fall. We watched Huey Newton fall. I saw the film footage of Huey Newton after he began to be coked up, doped up, and hooked up with Elaine Brown, who was, by the admission of an Alphabet Boy programmer, his greatest creation. For he had created her simply for infiltrating the Black Panthers, getting close to Huey Newton, turning him on to dope, and bringing dope into the Panthers. Bobby Seale himself said that when Huey Newton came to him with the idea of, well, let's use drug money to help fund the revolution, he said, the party is over. And indeed, the party has been over for some time. And from that point forward, COINTELPRO, which is the name of a counterintelligence program set up by the Alphabet Boys to infiltrate community organizations that were rooted in the ghetto, because Hoover had a deadly fear that there was a black messiah that would rise up from the ghetto. This is part of his writings, not my own imagination or creation. This is what he wrote in his own papers, in the COINTELPRO papers that you can find. They were released by the Freedom of Information Act under Clinton. If you look in those papers, which I had the full stack of those papers at one time, you will find, in his own words, Hoover was definitely afraid that a black messiah would rise up from the ghettos of America. And so he was proactive in doing everything he could to especially assault the black male with mind control. So now we have to look fast forward and look at the role models that were placed before us in the form of rappers. And especially during the time period when the conscious or pro-black or knowledge rap was a popular, well-selling category of rap. I recall that in the late 80s, prior to NWA, if you did not display some level of pro-black consciousness in your rap, you didn't have as much popularity. It was a thing of popularity even. And you saw different rappers such as Jazzo start off one way, and then when the pro-black consciousness knowledge rap began to come in, and KRS-One and different ones began to lead that brigade, you saw people who weren't involved in it suddenly begin to wear medallions and beads and dreads and different things of that nature because it was popular. Def Jeff was another example. Oh, I know my hip-hop. And of course the leader of that movement, from my deduction, and I know he wasn't the first, because we even have in a Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 a line where it said, you must heed the words of the master teacher, and they were referring to Dr. York. And Dr. York plays a huge part in this as well, and we're going to get off into him somewhat, a taste. But it was Rakim that was well known for lines such as, with knowledge of self, it's nothing I can't solve. At 360 degrees I revolve. It's an actual fact. It's not an act. It's been proven indeed as I proceed to make the crowd keep moving. And it was that intricacy of lyrics and the Masonic overtones behind some of his expressions that really turned us on, and it really turned me on. And I remember when he said, all praises due to Allah, and that's a blessing. And that made me decide, well, you know, I need to look into this study that they're studying. It was a part of being a fresh MC at one time. And the story goes that Rakim was a good student in school, and his father turned him on to a lot of things. In the song In the Ghetto, he says, I'm glad I listened when my father was rapping to me, because back in the days we lived as slaves. So we can deduce that his father was a Masonic man. Is that a stretch? And turned him on to these things. And growing up in New York at the time that he did, when the 5% Nation was strong, and the Ansaru Allah community, which was led by Dr. York, at the time known as Imam Isa, was also strong. Brand Nubians came out. All of these other groups came out with the same philosophies. These things came out, and Rakim was a mainstay, a fixture in that. And people would even say the God, Rakim. You know, that comes from 5% Nation terminology, to call oneself a God. But we also know that it is the root of the Luciferian line from the very beginning. Whether it's colored or shaded black, or whether it's Caucasoid white, it's the same Luciferian line. And unfortunately, it found its way into our communities by way of an art form that we know as hip-hop. That's something you won't hear Griff say. That's something Black Dot won't say, and that's something that C.L. Lewis won't say. But it's nonetheless true. Stop me when I'm lying. These are the things that we were taught by way of Black Masonry through hip-hop music. Black Masonry was running the old school. If you consider a few things, and let's look at a few things. We want to be as wise and civilized as we can be. We're going to deal with the 720th degree. You can be well-rounded. And again, these are Masonic terms, and we're going to show you how Masonic terms found their way into consciousness hip-hop. And we know that the devil does not create anything. He only can take and remake, but he cannot create. And so the terms that we use, many of the terms that we use in our daily speech, come from the same root, this Masonic book of phrases, the Masonic philosophy. So when you say somebody's well-rounded, you're talking about 360 degrees. And 360 degrees is only of the light side. 360 degrees going back the other way is the dark side. And to truly be wise and civilized, they say you need to have 720. And Dr. York taught the 720 degrees, the dark side and the light side. I studied Dr. York extensively and then turned around and taught it in my neighborhood. So I have repented for that. And before you all, God and man, I repent again and again and again. But we got to talk about some things. And we're going to talk about the bloodline and how these things go down the bloodline. How and why it's important among Masons and frats to be a legacy. Oh, well, you know, I'd have an easy time getting in because my grandfather was one, and his father before him was one. So that would make me a legacy. Well, ironically, this is the same way that the familiar spirit operates. And we're talking about the familiar spirit operating as pride, when it's black pride. And in the black Masonic teachings, which are based off the same thing, they have the same root. The Luciferian lie is the root. However, there are a few differences, and we're going to examine some of those differences. And those differences will be brought into play in these days and times, and it's one reason why you have a black man in the White House today. So we will be able to relate Rakim, Islam, and the Dyin of Diana to why there's a black man in office today and why there's so much fear about him being Muslim, quote unquote. And to all my Muslim brothers and sisters, to my man Shahid Shabazz, if you get a chance to see your man's, last I heard you was in Egypt, but if this reaches your eye sockets, brother, you know I love you and I respect you, and we learned a great deal of things together. And when I was in full-fledged Hebrew Israelite mode and he was in full-fledged Islamic mode, we lived together. And that was the second time that the Most High set up a situation where I lived with a practicing Muslim while I was in full-fledged Israelite mode. And it was a lesson that he was teaching, that it's divide and conquer, that between Ishmael and Israel there should be beef. It's the devil's doing. Whether we're talking about overseas in the Middle East, or whether we're talking about here in the States, between what people believe about the followers of Jesus versus the evil empire of Islam, and how people mistakenly believe that our president, who is a Luciferian of the bloodline of the serpent, he is a bloodline Luciferian. He's related to 6 U.S. presidents. He's related to Grant, and he's related to Winston Churchill. He's bloodline Illuminati, and he's not getting on his face 5 times a day and facing the east. He is not denying himself pork. And it's not because, well, when they're in direct warfare, they're told they don't have to do that stuff, blah, blah, blah. It's because there's a satanic version of everything. You know some people that call themselves Christian, and do they act like Christ? You find the same thing has happened with Islam. Things have been tainted, my brothers and my sisters. Do you know the same thing has happened with Judaism? What is a moil? What is the moil's job? Come on, let's heavyweight jam. What's the Talmud? Why do they say we have to say Yahweh when we know it's YHVH? So we know that there's been lies told in every organized religion. But what Yeshua was all about was breaking out of the tradition of religion and dealing with the truth. He said that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Not your religion, not your church, not your particular belief or science that you study, but the truth. And the truth has only one name. It has no particular class, no particular gang. People treat their religion like a gang. I'm a this and you are that, so we pose a clash. That is the divide and conquer. 101. So, we're going to deal with the 720th degree. Please believe me. And we got to talk about some mamas. How you going to talk about people mama? Easy, like this. We're talking about May sons. May sun. In May, you have the bull god, Taurus, and you have the Gemini, Janus. And the sun worship, not the S-O-N worship, but the S-U-N worship, like in the name Ra, Kim. And you have the Eastern Star, which is really the East Stars, which comes from Ashtar, Ashtaroth, and where you get the word Esther. All the same root. We have a visual for that. Look at the words. Forward is backward and backward is forward, just like life on here. So give me a second. Okay, there it is. You see it? E-stars, Esters, Ashtar. Some of you in the New Age know about the Ashtar command. That's who some of the New Agers have been deceived into thinking is the alien race that helped to seed man, and they're going to help us, and they're going to intervene and fight against the Illuminati, blah, blah, blah. It's nothing. See, that's why you have to pick up your Bible. Pick up a Bible. If you don't do nothing but look at it as a book, as a guidebook, to understand the playbook that the Illuminati use. They're using it. You separating or isolating yourself from it is only keeping you foolish and ignorant to the things that they do and the plans and plots that they play. You don't even recognize some of the names of the demons that they're using come from the pagan gods or false gods in that book. So at the very least, know what's in it before you can say you like it, you dislike it, you don't mess with it. Okay, we can do a study of Crowleyan literature, and everybody will crack open that book and look and try to find this, that, and the third. But some people have such a spiritual allergy to the Bible, and that is nothing but evidence of some sort of demonic force of denial, trying to keep you from seeing the truth within the covers of that book. But I digress. The East Stars or Eastern Star, and their symbol is a pentagram, straight up and down, with the point pointing down at that, which is to represent the goat head of Mendes. I know you see how it is the head of the goat. The bottom part is the goat's beard. The two parts on the lower left and right is the ears, and the two parts that stick up at the top is the horns. That's the goat's head. And inside of the goat's head is a pentagon. Inside of a pentagram, inside of every pentagram is a pentagon. That little shape in the middle, that's a pentagon. That's what we call our seat of defense in this great nation of ours. Well, on the Eastern Star symbol, on their pentagon, there's an F, A, T, A, L. Ask your grandma, your auntie, why do it say fatal inside of their symbol of the order of the Eastern Star? Ask her. She gonna say, well, the F stand for one person, the A stand for another person. Boy, I tell you, don't take a wizard on my lizards and tell me it's raining. In the center, there's a pentagon, and that's the same symbol that you find for Chrysler. Okay? So, we're seeing the relationship between why the Bible and overstanding things it says. It says the devil is the prince of this world. If you really believe that, none of this stuff should blow your mind. The fact that it's blowing your mind tells me you didn't believe what the Bible said. You thought it was lightweight jamming. Now when it's talking about mammon. So at the very least, the Eastern Stars, who are the female leg of the Masons, the things that they have to do. Perhaps some of you have some good homegirls that's told you about some of the sexual hazing that goes on in sororities, in universities across the land. Or perhaps you yourself know firsthand about these things and would never tell. But it is true, and it is real. And the breeding ground for the Masonry and the Eastern Stars is the frats and the sororities. They want people who come from the universities, people who come from good backgrounds. They want certain bloodlines, because the demons that run these organizations, that all stem from the Brotherhood of the Snake, are all about bloodline. Because going back to the book of Genesis, the enmity was placed between the seed of the serpent and the bloodline of Eve. One bloodline against another. So that's why it's important, the legacy, when it comes to fraternities and sororities, because it's a bloodline thing going all the way back. The demons don't want no junk. They want people of certain lineage, especially. So when you become a part of the Eastern Stars, much like with the sororities on the college campus, You got to do some things. In order to open up the doorways, like their symbol is a portal or a stargate, a gate for stars or fallen ones to come through the pentagram, you got to do some things to open up a doorway, a gate within yourself. You are a temple. From the dome to the soul. You're a temple to the soul. You are a temple. So in order to open your temple up to allow for these certain gods to come in, you have to do heinous acts which tear the veil, the fabric of time and space, the dimensional veil. You think this is just air. When Morpheus says that line in The Matrix, what did you think that it meant? It says that in Ephesians 2:2, Lucifer is the prince of the power of the air. Because the air is not just oxygen. Spirits operate throughout the air. They're constantly in here now. They're everywhere, all around you, in the space that you call air. In order to let them in, you must vibrate a certain way. Anger can do it. Hatred, avarice, fear. They love fear. That's why you see in certain movies about the vampire loves fear. It feeds off of fear. The vampire loves, or in Star Wars, what they tell Luke Skywalker, don't feed your anger, because that'll turn you to the dark side. All of these concepts, Crowleyan concepts, okay, perverted and converted from the actual reality of the spiritual world we live in. So there are rituals designed. Sexual rituals are the favorite ones that create a certain vibration because it freak your mind out, put your mind on a certain level. Imagine being the wife of a worshipful master and you're at a gathering where, say, Masons are coming in from all across the nation to come and do a meet and greet. And this comes from the testimony of Brother L, who will remain anonymous beside that because he did his due diligence as a soldier, and he went in and infiltrated by invite by a Mason to one of these open houses that I'm about to tell you about right now. And he saw this go down just how I'm explaining it, exactly the same way. And you, as the wife of this Mason, get told that, well, because brother such and such is here from out of town without female companionship, you need to take care of him. And you're left alone with him in a room, because these Masonic events generally take place where? Hotels. And you have to take care of that business. Why is that? Well, the same thing happens in gangs, which is nothing but street level versions of Masonry. Look at some of these symbols. Look at the symbols of the Gangster Disciples, the folks. The Midwest gangs really have very satanic symbols, the pitchforks and the pentagrams. The same practices, because it's the same demon spirits that want the same result in the end. They don't care if they got to get it street level, collegiate level, or corporate level. It's the same thing. And so this is the responsibility of a good Masonic wife, if she's an Eastern Star, which she would be encouraged to be. And I know this information not just from Brother L's account, who I trust, but also from different things that I know personally firsthand from loved ones. And this is a part of why you hear so much talk about Will and Jada being swingers. People will say that Will's bisexual and Jada is too, and they swing. And that information was brought to me by, I know some people that are involved in the business. And that information came out through them many years ago, before it began to be popular fodder for internet and YouTube videos today. So now let's shift gears a little bit. I went down that side of the page. Oh, and of course we know the Ancient Order of Nobles of the Mystic Shrine is another name for the Masons. So they admittedly say that they are a organization designed after ancient practices. And what mystic shrine? This is about the fact that you as a Mason, or you as an Eastern Star, are nothing but a shrine, a temple to be opened up for spirit beings to come in and out of. It's not painted that way for you. You are told that in order to reach certain levels of success, you need to align yourself with the spirit realm. You are shown the checkerboard floor in the rituals. Every Masonic temple that you go into, you will find the checkerboard floor. And in many videos, some people have been exposing this now for some time, you will find the checkerboard floor. You may see many houses built by who? By Masons. Masons build houses with checkerboard floors in the kitchen or the bathroom. You may even go to the mall and see stores with checkerboard floors. This has a lot of meaning. The simplest meaning is there's a game going on in which you are but a pawn. But a deeper meaning is the black representing the darkness and the white representing the light. The black being the darkness, and you are held in darkness in your physical form. But once you receive once you receive your spirit guide, you are brought to the light. Now you can really see how to operate. And how do you receive your spirit guide? You open yourself up to it through ritual. Once you reach a certain level, they begin to tell you, and this is why bisexuality is so prominent, they begin to tell you, hey, we are really not even physical beings. That's being kept in the black or the darkness. We are really spiritual beings, and spirit beings have no gender. And they begin to run that no gender BS on you. This is a little something for you too, Brother Trey, because you asked me about the frats and the sororities. And this is kind of a way to work that in. And please believe, we're going to get more off into Rakim by the time this is over. You'll understand how it all fits together. But this part had to be laid down as foundation. So the bisexual thing becomes a big part for a number of reasons, because like I said, they convince you that you're not a physical being as much as you are spirit, and spirit beings have no gender. Then they go even further, and in order to conjure up certain beings, you have to do certain things on the physical plane. The same way that murder brings a certain spirit to you, okay? Adultery brings a certain spirit to you. Imagine pedophilism. Imagine homosexual sex. These things that are in direct opposition to the will of God and the original commandment, which was to be fruitful and multiply. Lucifer wishes, and his minions, he goes by many other names, it's still the same game. His minions and he wish to defile that original commandment so heinously that it does indeed rip the veil of time and space. It causes you to vibrate a certain type of way, even if you have resigned in your conscious mind to say, well, it's okay. In your subconscious mind, which always knows the truth, you're doing terrible damage, and you're vibrating in such a way as to open yourself up like an antenna, which you are. You're a big antenna. You can sit in a room and you can feel how people feel about you. You can sit in a room and you can smolder with jealousy and a person can feel it. You're an antenna. You both pick up and you send out. Once you do something so heinous, your frequencies begin to vibrate in such a way that you open the doorway up for something to come in you. This is why drinking has the effect that it has on you. Some of us more than others, but on all of us on some level. And it even will tell you on the bottle, because Lucifer has to mark his things so that when you pick them out of your ignorance, which means you see it and ignore it, or your lack of knowledge, which is different. People try to say ignorance is lack of knowledge, and that's a lie. Look at the word. That's double thing. You see it right in the word, but yet you think something else. That's double thing. Splitting the mind in two places. That also opens the veil and creates a space for the demon of confusion to come in. So you have to be cautious about the things that you think, because you will open the veil and allow for spirit beings to come through. But when you vibrate in such a way, you will open yourself up to receive the energies of different levels of spirit beings. And we know there are different levels of spirit beings because we're told in Ephesians 6 and 12 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and spirits and principalities in dark high places. And we know from a study of demonology and Crowleyism that you need different spells and different rituals. Why? Because there's different levels of demons to conjure. The same ritual can't get stronger, more powerful demons. Stronger, more powerful spirits, because that's the lie you're told. If they told you it was demons, you'd never involve yourself. So you be cautious of people that try to get you to call forth the spirits, even in the name of ancestors, my brothers and sisters. So many of the wise, civilized brothers have fallen to this Luciferian lie, noir, the black version. The same lie. But if they tell you it's African spirits, you go for it. You gang goofy. You really are. It's the same lie. But if they tell you it's got to do with you, so you're prideful too, then you'll go for it. You can see it in others. But if they say, well, this is what we do, it come from the Bantu tribe, or it come from the Zulu tribe, then you wide open. So you let your guard down for Lucifer if somebody tell you it's black. Come on. That's heavyweight jam. So let's get on to the Zulu Nation. Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation. Party people, everybody love it. It come on to this day, and it's 20 years old now, ain't it? To this day, it come on at a jam, and the young people feel it. How they feel it? They don't remember that. We know what we dance, because we feel the nostalgia. We remember, oh yeah, I was in middle school. But the young people, what are they feeling? The instruments are old. It's not mixed down the way today's records are mixed. It's not as much bass. But for some reason, they feel that. It's because of the energy that was put into that. Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation. Well, the Soul Sonic Force. And we know his crew, his large collective, was called the Zulu Nation. And they were called that because he was once a leader of a gang in the Bronx called the Black Spades. Okay, which started off as a community group, became a gang after dope was filtered in through them. And if you're a leader in a gang, you don't think you get to put your hands on that money? And so from that, once you are brought into that level of government involvement, they begin to teach you certain things as the leader. Like they did with Eazy-E. When Eazy-E went to go visit George Bush, and Ice Cube had the famous line in No Vaseline, "I never have dinner with the president. I never have dinner with the president." How does Eazy-E get to go have dinner with a Bush? But it was because Eazy-E was being used to bring in the dope to his community. Rappers have been used for this for some time because gangsters and rappers were hand in hand from the very beginning. Spoonie G, one of the oldest school rappers, is really considered the father of gangster rap, and he's from New York City. Oh, we're gonna heavyweight jam. Please believe it. So now, Zulu Nation, the Black Spades, government infiltration of gangs and community organizations. Gangland says it enough. If you've seen an episode or two of that, they say it all the time. Gangs stemmed from community organizations. Community organizations were infiltrated by the CIA. Don't believe that? Ever seen Fahrenheit 9/11? This is why the videos be long. I have to give you proof of every little thing, or at least get your mind to going in the direction of proof, and you find the rest. In Fahrenheit 9/11, Michael Moore explained that there was a small group, a small community group that sat around and drank tea and talked about little political issues. And one of the members ended up getting killed in the motorcycle accident, I believe it was. Unbeknownst to the rest of the group, this person's name appeared in the paper as something other than what they knew him as. And in the article it said that this person was an undercover officer of the Alphabet Boys. So all of this time they were sitting around drinking tea and talking about politics. My man was in there amongst their group, acting like one of them, keeping files on them. That's COINTELPRO 101. And if they did it to a little small-time group like that, ladies and gentlemen, they did it to my group. I ain't nothing and nowhere. Ain't got no money, no power, no cachet of weapons. But they did it to my group in Detroit. We had infiltrator come in, without a doubt. And we got into it too. And that was their job. They call them agent provocateurs. And you don't have to be large for it to happen to you. All you have to be is effective. So, if we know that can happen with small-time little groups like the one mentioned in Fahrenheit 9/11, is it really a stretch to overstand what happened with the Zulu nation, which was large in New York City and Africa Bambaataa? Come on. Think about it. Think about it. Another Rakim song. But it's ironic how Obama and Tupac, both savior figures, come from community organizer backgrounds. Ironic. Let's look a little bit more at Ra. The first $1 million ticket deal, the first rap group, and it was really just a duo, to get $1 million deal was Eric B. and Rakim. Hence the title, Paid in Full. I remember in Detroit, where gangs do not flourish. And people would think, oh, what? You guys have a gang problem? No, we don't. Because to have a gang problem, you have to have some sense of unity. And because of the makeup of Detroit, made of a lot of people who came up from down south on the dolo tip, left their families and everything down there, just to come up and get some of that factory money and be solo and dolo. It's a very dolo-minded place. You know, you have to have some trust and unity to have gangs. And that wasn't the tempo. So I remember growing up, the graffiti that you would see everywhere, as opposed in some places you see gang fuss graffiti. In Detroit, it was get paid. Paid in full. Get paid. And up and down the street, you would hear the dope men riding in the Laredo trucks and the Renegades and whatnot, paid in full. They was bumping Rakim Paid in Full. There was at the time it was the rumor that Eric B's baby mama lived on the east side. Wasn't a rumor. Guess what? All things under the darkness shall come to light. Why did I end up meeting his stepkid? It wasn't his baby, but he raised her like she was. And she was raised up spoiled and privileged because Eric B was her stepdaddy, and I knew her. So it's true. But what does this have to do with anything? Well, because why was he going back and forth to Detroit? Eric B was the man with that work, and Rakim was the man with that word, and the two came together. You know yourself, it don't make no sense for a rapper the level of Rakim to have had a DJ the level of Eric B. But what did you think? Something the source told you to think? Oh, well, you know, they grew up together and Blase Spleen. No. The story that was most prominent was Eric B was the man in his hood and he had some money and he put Rakim on. This is because of dope, my friends. And this is one reason why they had the money and the status and the power that they did before the $1 million deal came. They was talking paid in full. Let me take a second and say rest in peace and love and blessings to two of my good friends. My man Harry Monster, Harry Hare, and my man Dre, 7 Mile Dre. That's the 7 for 7 Mile. Dre was a millionaire, without a doubt. Harry Hare, 100,000-aire. And both of them are gone to this day, but they told me some things. And no, they wasn't millionaires because they made good investments in the stock market either. But they told me some things, and they were connected to different rap icons locally. And they did business together. And this was not unusual. So that is but one example of the connection between the game, and the rap game. And ironic, when we was rapping, nobody called it the rap game. We talked about it as an art form or rap music. But game didn't become connected until Tupac. Tupac saw the relationship, the correlation between the two as a Panther child, well versed in COINTELPRO. He directly saw the relationship between the dope game and the rap art form, and he began to call it the rap game. And to this day, a lot of MCs say rap game because of Pac. Test me out. Now, let's go to the Paid in Full posse. Kool G Rap was a member of the Paid in Full posse, which was Rakim crew. And on the back of the album cover for Paid in Full, you can see Rakim and them all posing with their big stupid ropes that cost a couple dollars. Even the fake ones cost a couple dollars. And showing and proving that they was paid in full. And G-Rap was among them. Well, Kool G Rap ended up being the baby daddy of Corinne Stephens, who we know is a Project Monarch butterfly sex slave, government level, now with Bill Maher, or Will Maher, who some of you have shown and proved in the videos as seeming to have an extra dimensional over him. You know, with today's digital technology and the grace of the Most High, Yahweh, we are able to see things that we were unable to see before, relating back to the John Carpenter film They Live, where Roddy Piper was, through a particular lens, able to see the extra-dimensional entities, the alien invader beings inside of the people around him, because he had on a certain lens. Well, now we are looking through those lenses, ladies and gentlemen, and we are able to see from time to time what you think is a digital glitch. The Most High is allowing for things done in the darkness to be revealed and brought to the light, and people have seen it on Bill Maher. And to make that connection, Bill Maher, or Will Maher, Maher meaning to destroy, Maher, the origin of war, the M and the W, the same letter, upside down. Bill Maher is now with Corinne Stephens, and how ill is that? But it just goes to show you that these extra-dimensional beings have fed off of hip-hop and have fed off of the victims in the hood for some time through drugs and sex, the sex rituals, and through the drugs which control the mind control. Now, Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu. Let's think about the Chetahuri. In the Zulu tradition, it is believed that there is a being that is serpentine, that is able to transcend the dimensions like a demon or a jinn. And this serpentine being has been at odds with the Zulu people for thousands of years. They call it the Chetahuri. And you've seen the interviews of Credo Mutwa, who was an old Zulu shaman, who talked about it and drew them and shows you how they looked and everything. And this is a direct correlation to Genesis chapter 1, where we find the word Nekash used for serpent, not the word snake. And you see Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and different ones, the Renaissance painters, doing their due diligence as illuminists, giving you the wrong impression of what the story says by having a snake dangling from a tree and an apple in Eve's hand, neither of which can be found in the actual scripture itself. But you wouldn't know that until you open the book. It does not say snake, and it don't say apple. It says serpent, and it's a word for snake in Hebrew, and it's not Nekash. Nekash means the whisperer. And we're told in the story right there, he was standing up and talking to Eve. How do you know he was standing up? Because when he was cursed, he was put on his belly. Let's heavyweight jam. So there was a being like what the Zulu nation, the Zulus, talk about, the Chetahuri. And they are not the only civilization to talk about this reptilian being. As a matter of fact, most cultures around the world have a myth connected to this reptilian being, which was the being that ran Atlantis. So 13th sign and the rest of y'all that try to fool people into some kind of fantasy, a romanticized version of Atlantis, that it was black people and blah blah blah, or even you foolish ones who think it was the Ashtar Command or some super white people. It was reptilians, baby boy. They had to live somewhere, and that's the mystery of Atlantis. Of course, a sea people would be reptilian. You stay in the water too much, you will scale up. They was made for that, and that was one of the beings that was here on the planet that Cain was afraid of, why he had to be marked when there was only supposed to be 4 people on the planet at the time. Come on, let's heavyweight jam. So, Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu nation, the Chetahuri, or the reptilians, these were demon beings, and the beings that had been at odds with man since the very beginning, according to Genesis, and according to the so-called myths of cultures all around the world. You have Quetzalcoatl. You have, in Asia, you have the reverence of the dragons. Where's all of this coming from? It's coming from reality. So, let's make some more connections. So, with Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu nation, well, okay, let's deal with this. Looking for the perfect beat. I gotta get mine. I'm out to get it. I must get mine. I'm out to get it. You know, we feel a certain nostalgia. There was a magic on this music. If we can talk about the songwriter's secret, and we can indict Ashford and Simpson and my homegirl Shaka Khan and Marvin Gaye, and we can talk about all of them, you mean to tell me you that game goofy and you that in love with Africa Bambaataa and hip hop, you got so much love for a thing you can't see the truth in it? I hope you're not that way about your woman. P-Funk, like costumes. Parliament Funkadelic wore the costumes of custom. Customs, costumes. It was there, so I grabbed it. You wear your costume to represent your custom. Exact same word. Switch the vowels, and the E only serves in the word costume to make the U long. Well, you can take a line and put it over there. You don't need the E. So it's the exact same word. It shows the origin of the two, custom and costume. You wear a costume to show your custom. And all of that has to do with what? Tradition. And Jesus said you mix your tradition up with your laws. And that ain't right. But a big part of Africa Bambaataa and his group, and Parliament Funkadelic and their group, was the fact they dressed in these ill costumes representing various customs. Some of them iller than others, but all part of telling the story of what they were told about all of these different beings and races and whatnot. That's what it was all about. So when you see Africa Bambaataa, look at the video for Planet Rock. Look at it. Take note of the people entranced and the robot. You know, I started to do a whole series on the robot, James Brown, and Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson not only did the Crowleyan law of reversal in full effect, where Crowley said, learn how to talk backwards, learn how to walk backwards. And James Brown was the father of that. But the robot and the other mechanized movements that you saw in breakdancing and people going out of their mind as if something demonic possessed them, even endangering yourself doing moves like the 1990, which was the head spin or the spin up on your wrist. You could break your wrist and break your neck and something else too. And lots of people got busy on the floor, and you get on the floor, you scooting around, you having a fit. And the old folks used to say things like that, and I was quite offended at the time. And some of you are offended now because it struck that demon, the strong man demon of denial. Denial is a river in Egypt. It shouldn't be in you. But we see the evidence of trance. We're talking about trance, dance, same thing that you find in rituals in Africa among the Zulu nation, who admittedly were at odds or war with the serpentine beings. So the Serpentine beings scored one when you see Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation playing electronic instruments, synthesizers, fake drums, drum machine, which is a frequency that has been set on a machine, as opposed to I am putting my frequency, boop, through the drum, a real drum with an animal skin draped over a barrel. Now we have synthetic versions. In the wilderness of synthetic, these things were used to pulsate and put out energies that were putting people in a trance. What? Look at the names on the machines. They'll even tell you. One of the #1 machines, Kanye's machine of choice at one time was the Triton. And at one time it's the same one I had, the ASR-10. N-Sonic, inside the sound. But the names on the machines, even the companies that make them, they are involved as well. They are used to tune you up to certain frequencies and open you up to certain spirits. It's why when them beats come on, you feel a different way than when, say, even Earth, Wind, and Fire or something organic comes on. And when I say organic, I mean made with instruments that come from materials of this world. Wood, brass, guitars used to be made of cat guts, okay? The animal skin of the drum, real materials that catch a real vibration. You bang on a piano, a real piano, doom, 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 doom. When you stop banging, what it's doing? Doom, vibration. Bang on a synthesizer and stop. When you stop, it stops. There's no vibration, except for the controlled frequency that's shot through the air. And so the mastery of this was done through the mechanical machines. And I don't know that Africa Bambaataa was aware of this, nor George Clinton, nor Rakim. But it's the truth about the system that they were in. And the God that I know, the all-knowing, all-seeing, true and living, Ahaya Yahweh, plays the game fair. And he will at some point reveal to you what's going on around you so you don't be in the dark. All things that are in the darkness are brought to the light. But what happens is people become selectively able to hear or able to see. Or they become ignorant because of the money involved or the fame involved. They don't want to see certain things. But so Africa Bambaataa brought into the program. Well, one thing we know that's a telltale sign of the program is bloodline. So his son, and I wondered, how come I never saw him and his son kicking it like that? Of course, he was part of the Zulu Nation, and they did kick it, but there seemed to be a strange distance, like you see between entertainers and their famous siblings. His son was Africa Islam, Ice-T's producer, off the rip. Ice-T was supposed to represent the West Coast. Africa Islam come from Africa Bambaataa, born on the East Coast, you would think. So this show you that the West Coast, East Coast thing was nothing but a farce. It's one big family, just like it is with all things Illuminati. And Africa Islam was Ice-T's producer. Ice-T has a military history and background. He came from out of the military. Straight into movies and record deals. On what record label? Sire Records. Sire means king. And Lucifer is considered the king of this thing. And he was famous for the cop killer fiasco, which was nothing but a way to glorify him and give him a certain level of street credibility, only so later on he would be playing a cop himself, which is double think. You're supposed to reconcile that some kind of way, think both things at the same time. Oh, well, he can be a hard gangster, and then he can play the cop. Double think, split your mind in two, which puts you in confusion. And then he marries a surgically enhanced Project Monarch sex kitten, Coco. They have a reality show, which we know is all about mind control programming. All reality shows are about mind control programming the stars that's on them. A reality show is a way to do a ritual in front of all of you that dumbs down, degrades, traumatizes, and pumps up the pride and ego of the stars that's in the reality show. Every reality show is for that. They put Flavor Flav through them reality shows. It was part of mind control programming. They had to tighten him up for some reason. Perhaps Flav really felt that way about some things. Some real fight to power must have been in him. So they had to tighten him up, put him through the reality show programming. Same thing they do with rehab. That's why the chick used to say, Amy Winehouse, I don't want to go to rehab. But who wanted her to go? Her father. This is more than a notion. So pimps as MK Ultra butterfly handlers. Ice-T was known as a gangster rapper, but he was known really more so, and he would tell you himself, more so as a player and pimp rapper. And that's mind control 101. People say, well, how can a man get a woman to go out and have sex? And that's mind control, demonic mind control. The same thing the government was doing on a larger level. They the number one pimps. But pimps as MK Ultra butterfly handlers in Motown and in the hood by default. In Motown, the record label, and in Motown, the city. Why I first encountered it among women after styling myself as a player in my rap alter ego, like my father, an occultist before me. Mind control, outer space and pimping or mind control going together. There's no outer space, only inner space. That's where the battle goes on at. The same thing that happens when you take a psychotropic drug. That's why George Clinton and them had the outer space imagery. George Clinton didn't go to no outer space, but he went to inner space. Do you see the correlation? NASA didn't go to no outer space, but they went to inner space by way of dimension and the planes of existence. The planes, that's the traveling. They traveling on those planes of existence in the mind. You can go to other realities. Consider the Kurt Russell movie Inner Space for more of that. And Kurt Russell has been long considered one of the main culprits or players in mind control in Hollywood. There's a lot of interesting things. If you really want to trip yourself out, type in Kurt Russell and mind control. Kurt Russell, mind control, Inner Space. Inner Space will tell you about the movie, but just put in Kurt Russell mind control. You'll find a lot of weird anomalies. But I digress somewhat, because now we're going to take you from the outer space imagery of the Zulu nation, Planet Rock. Remember, that was about outer space. Listen to the lyrics. They were coming from another planet, they said, to Earth to cause the world to rock. Same thing you hear in don't jam on it. The same thing. Look at the imagery for Nucleus, that's the name of that group, for the album that Jam On It came out of. Somebody go Google it. Homework. Nucleus album cover. Type in Jam On It. Jam On It album cover. And tell me you don't see some brothers on a spaceship with a reptilian riding with them. You can't make this stuff up. The reptilian makes you believe that you're going to outer space, either through drugs or some other form of mind control. And this is where you have that commonality between Africa Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation and Parliament Funkadelic, who was talking about what? Riding on the mothership connection. Say, recording angels, we have come to reclaim the pyramids, which we know, again, had to do with demonic entities perpetrating as if they were from other planets. I think we heavyweight jamming. I don't know. Now, we said Eric B was in the game. Okay, I already said that. I knew his stepkid. Okay, all right. Rakim. Introduced and popularized 5% Islam and Masonic astral theism and imagery. and more mental manipulation into occult imagery. Friday the 13th, walking down Elm Street. You step in my realm, you get beat. Now, we assume that it's Rakim talking. But like we showed and proved with the songwriter's secret for so many artists, from the genres of R&B and even funk, we showed and we proved that when you think it's them speaking as themselves, it's something else speaking through them. And as I did some chores yesterday, I allowed for Follow the Leader to play and repeat on my phone over and over and over again to see if I would hear something new. See, it's something different with Follow the Leader. Follow the Leader is arguably one of the coldest lyrical performances by a rapper ever. And he takes you to outer space and the outer space imagery. You know, planets as small as balls of clay, straight into the Milky Way, worlds out of sight. As far as the eye can see, not even a satellite. And I stop and turn around and look. As you stare in the darkness, your knowledge is took. Keep staring. Soon you suddenly see a star. You better follow it because it's the R. Now, it's how many years later, and I can say that song from beginning to the end. But I don't even realize what I be saying. And for a lot of people who know Follow the Leader from beginning to end, they say it too, automatically, as if in a trance. Rakim was putting us in a trance. And let me give this anecdote again, just for this one. And we're going to be out of here soon. Please believe it. I was playing basketball in the backyard. Neighbors' radio blaring. I'm playing basketball to the radio. I'm about to go in the house. I was stopped. Advertisement. No, DJ came on as the advertisement getting ready to come. He said, after these advertisements, up next, the new Eric B. and Rakim, Follow the Leader. I stopped. I stood there with the ball. I was waiting. Advertisement got through. Follow the Leader came on. I was entranced, literally entranced, and tears began running down my eyes as I thought to myself, I'll never be this fresh. That was quite an emotional response for listening to a lyrical performance. And I was very into it at the time. I'd heard everything you're supposed to hear, followed everybody you're supposed to follow, heard all kind of fresh stuff. Nothing had that effect on me. It had to do with Rakim's Masonic leanings and the heavy high levels of Masonic and 5% I am God imagery that he was putting in that song. That song is all about I am God. When he says follow the leader, he is placing himself as a God. But I maintain we can't blame Ra for that. We can't blame William Griffin for that. That spirit of Ra, Kim, the sun god of Kemet, the sun god of Egypt, Ra, was saying those things. And that was the leader. And when we know that to be the false light of Lucifer, it was Lucifer who was the leader that you were supposed to follow. And that's why I was entranced. And that's why so many of us that follow lyricists and know about the greatest performances of different lyricists will all agree that, oh, it was something supernatural about that one. That's Heavyweight Jam. Move the Crowd was about influence, magnetism, hypnotism, his ability to do that, to move the crowd. Was it the serpentine energy of being able to hypnotize that came through Parliament Funkadelic, Psycho, Alpha, Disco, Beta, Bio, Aquadoodoo? Psycho, the mind. Alpha, mind control programming. Beta, alpha and beta. Alpha is to control the males to kill. Beta is to control the females to sex. Psycho, alpha, disco, beta. Disco was the form of music. Disco was the disconnect, but the disco music. Disco, where it come from? To disconnect you from what? The God source. But disco was based on the boom, 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 the heart boom, 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 and that was the hypnotic aspect, like the clock tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And that's why house music and disco music and progressive and all those other forms have that same beat, boom, boom, boom. That's hypnotic. Techno in Detroit, mind control place, drugs, Mind control. Follow the leader. Who was the leader? We went through that. And Paid in Full was the Dope Man anthem. We're almost done. Please believe it. All right. From Ra to Rick Ross. We're going to speed through this. How do we connect one of the hardest, dopest rappers? Dope. He was dope, right? How do we connect one of the dopest rappers to one of the weakest rappers? Rick Ross. Rick Ross is so weak he couldn't wrap his way out of a paper bag with his fat butt. But some of y'all love him. You do. Yes, he's fat and he's a fat fag too, on top of that. He says it himself. And he's a dry snitcher. You ain't got a lick of street in you if you don't know what dry snitching is. That's telling on yourself, telling your business. If you in the game, you don't tell nobody. Every chance he get, he want to tell you he's selling drugs. I'm selling dope. Straight off the iPhone. That's dry snitching 101. Dope men don't mess with the phone like that, let alone say something like that. If you can say something like that, you are protected. You ain't ready. The dope game and the rap game. DMX even said, singers, rappers, don't become a part of the game. Insinuating that you had some choice to be in the music business and not be a part of the game. So perhaps some of the artists aren't equipped or credible enough, connected enough in the hood to be used to siphon dope into the hood. And DMX was one who could, and he made that choice to join the game. So he was advising that singers and rappers don't become a part of the game. Let's go. When I was in when I was in ATL, a young Atlanta rapper who was connected down there to some folks, to Shorty Low, told about seeing himself and a bunch of other people seeing, and you can imagine he wanted it seen because it was good for his street credibility. Seeing Jeezy getting work from the man in the young brother's hood. Somebody that everybody knew in his hood what he was doing. And Jeezy came and dropped it off or got it from my man. So Ricky Rose, was not the first. And ironic, he calls himself Rick Ross. And he want to talk about selling dope. And Rick Ross, the real Rick Ross, whose story, is notorious. We don't have to retell that. But the real Rick Ross said he got his work from the government. That's what he was saying when he was in jail still. When he first started talking. Now that he's out and about and getting a couple of dollars from old fat, funky, dry snitching Rick Ross with his flaming butt. Now the real Rick Ross is doing community organization. He came to Detroit not too long ago to talk to the kids. The real Rick Ross. After doing what he did with the government, according to his own words. So I'm selling dope straight off the iPhone. A dry snitching ex-popo, turnkey, boule butt buddy to Gay-Z. He says it himself in his rhyme. He says, in the beginning of some song, y'all know the name of the song. Somebody put it up there. You know what it is. What's understood don't have to be explained. He say, pants tight, no drawers on. What up, Jay-Z? What? And then him and Jay-Z make the song together called Freemason. In which Rick Ross in his lyrics blatantly want to make you believe that he won. And Jay-Z in his lyrics try to distance himself. I said I was a Mason. I never said I was a Mason. Get your punk butt out of here. And the Gangster Disciples checked Rick Ross too as not being a Mason. And showed and proved their affiliation to the Masons by doing so. Inside of a Masonic temple, they did a video. It should be on YouTube. Where they called Rick Ross out for trying to claim affiliation. And they showed and proved their affiliation to both. They was GDs and Masons. That proves the connection between the two. and how they get their symbolism to match esoteric and occult symbols, and they supposed to be some simple street Negroes. Let's jam. Jam. Teddy jamming for you. The real Rick Ross originally said the government gave him the work. Ironic how the rapper from the Miami dope port was ex-law enforcement. I know a rapper from the Magnolia who may be convicted to come on and co-sign to some of these things. I'm gonna talk with him and see if it's a way we can do that safely. Maybe. Then you have the dynamic of in Detroit, a lot of different things, you know, I could say. Maybe I'm going to skip that line. Yeah, I am going to skip that line. But there was an individual who had a sudden increase in gangsterism once he got into the business. Now, as long as we knew him and he was in the hip-hop circle, in the hip-hop community, you know, he wasn't no punk, but he wasn't off into no gangsterism. He was off into hip-hop. A real head. For real. Big locks and all. But once he got into the game, his behavior shifted. And he was putting guns on people and wilding out. Was it because of the music business involvement in the dope game, where you must be a gangster to survive? Let's continue. We can make a connection from the dope game to drugs and pharmacon and mind control, mingling with entertainers and community consciousness groups. Dope in the prisons, the gang in the prisons, the Muslims in the prisons, all have a connection. People want protection by being a Muslim in the joint. Protection by who? Why would the powers that be back that up? Because unfortunately, see, there's a lot of gangsterism going on. Why are the 5% nation notoriously thugged out? Clarence 13X, 13 for rebellion, the X for unknown or anything. You can make it anything, an alter ego. You make the connection of the dope game and mind control to mingling with the entertainers and the community consciousness groups, to the prisoners in jail who have to get dope from, you know, not just from girlfriends sneaking it in. Government forces bringing dope into the jail, the same way government forces bring dope into the community by way of community groups and organizations in the past, and now in the present time by way of rappers. Come on. Elijah Muhammad wore obviously Masonic gear. Noble Drew Ali stood in the Masonic stances, hand in the shirt, b-boy stance, the whole 9 yard. And Clarence 13X both had obvious Masonic poses, phrases. It's as easy to see as Allah born Cypher Divine. Talking about nobles of the mystic shrine. And their connection to Muslim, they'll say M-O-S-L-E-M. Come on. The b-boy stance, right and exact, actual fact, 360 degrees are revolved. These are the Masonic beginnings of knowledge rap, consciousness rap, and hip-hop. And one reason why it's so thoroughly ingrained in my conversation, from years and years of listening to that and being exposed to it, from the music to actually being a part of the culture. And then I say, Fire was awful white looking for a so-called Middle Easterner. That was a part of doublethink. When I went into Mosque number 1 on Thinkle Ave, the first mosque established because Elijah Muhammad received Fard Muhammad in Detroit, when you first walk into the mosque, doublethink hits you as soon as you walk in the mosque. Because you see a big picture of a white man, big huge picture, about 5 feet tall. The picture of a white man, well, it was big, while at the same time you're learning that the white man is the devil. LOL, I wrote. Wow. Because that's Mind Control 101. Double think. Feeds you 2 different realities at the same time. And it split your mind, short circuit your mind, to where you be in confusion. I can tell you anything then. Something pimps do. You got to heed the words of the master teacher. They were talking about York, Dr. York in Brooklyn, New York. Dr. York in Brooklyn, New York. That wasn't his name. Come on. They changed his name to that. Dr. York had a history where? In the music business. Doing what? Songwriter. The songwriter's secret. He understood the technique of conjuring Lucifer and giving homage to Lucifer by your lyrics and making it sound like it's to a man or a woman as a love song. He would have had to as a songwriter. Come on, let's heavyweight jam. So when you see Jay-Z with Jazzo, who brought him on, and Jay-Z is so uncreative, he named himself after his mentor, who he wouldn't even admit was his mentor today, I'm sure. They were dressed in Ansaru Allah garb in the video for the originators. And he said, later on, he said, I never read the scrolls. I was talking to the Brooklyn hardheads, the hard rocks in Brooklyn. He wanted to make himself sound like he was so hard, he didn't even pay no attention when he was under it. Get out of here. But ironically, how these offshoots of a real religion, Islam is a real religion as much as Hebrewism is before it's tainted. Once you get into the moon worship on either side, because the changing of the calendars and the worship of the moon and the lunar cycle affected both the Hebrews, the Israelites, and it affected the Ishmaelites, which were supposed to both be doing the same thing. That's why you have the common connections, the kosher, the same as halal. That's why you have the common connections, because they were both supposed to be doing the same thing. But they were both distorted by the pagan gods that lived in lands and areas around them. Very interesting. Okay. And it's strange how, unlike Orthodox Islam, they don't encourage for you to read the Quran. They don't discourage it. But I remember there was not so much emphasis on us reading the Quran. It was much like a church where Pastor Porkchop read to you what he wants you to hear. Most of the times you'll find brothers involved in the offshoots of Islam, and when I say offshoots, I mean specifically what you got from Noble Drew Ali or Clarence 13X or even Elijah Muhammad, because that was an offshoot. What you'll find is they are ignorant to Arabic, the Quran, and the Hadiths. So now we're dealing with chaos. K-O-S. Chaos, meaning knowledge of self. The chaos of knowing yourself over all things. And I know it's on the temples of Egypt. Know thyself. You better know something greater than yourself. Who are you? What is yourself but your ego? That's a way of pumping up pride and egotism. I am nothing and no one. I don't know myself. I don't have to know myself. What do you mean by knowing myself? It sounds kind of masturbatory to me. And that's what a lot of them brothers get off into. Well, yeah, brother. Well, you see, you mentally doing that. You know the word, mental masturbation. That's what they end up in. Going back and forth. Let's get in the cipher. And what are you building? Got a lot of kids. Your poor woman don't have things that she need to be comfortable. You're following after some man, some flawed man in his teachings. Yeshua was not a man alone. He was a man, the only example of man and God. Not like the pharaohs, not like Rakim. or any other man who called himself God. He didn't have to call himself God. He showed and proved. Another one of those terms. Show and prove, right? So, again, and he advised that we do greater works than he, and that we copy his example. So that's how you become God-man. Only through that example. Anything else is uncivilized. You can't do it from knowing yourself only. Do you understand that? You'll be self-centered and quite self-aware, but no good to the community. A bunch of self-centered individuals all calling themselves gods. A lot of chiefs and no Indians. Too many cooks in the kitchen. All the rest. It don't make sense, brothers and sisters. It's mind control of yourself, and indoctrination into the Luciferian lie, the Crowleyan belief system of man do as thou wilt. Because what you find from the brothers when they wise civilized gods is their belief that they can do what they want to do, especially concerning women. You got 3 wives, and you got 4 wives, and you got in the beginning. Oh, well, see, it was Lilith, and one woman is enough to try to handle and keep happy. Am I telling a lie? So that's part of the Luciferian lie of you're a God and you can do what you want to do, and the Crowleyan lie of man do as thou wilt. And it's greedy. You don't need no 2 wives. I want it though. Silly, silly, silly Negro. Oh, you simple ones, how long will you love simplicity? To the chaos of knowledge itself and the it's ours, so it's good. Well, we did it back in Africa. Everything we did in Africa wasn't right. Wake up. Matter of fact, the first ones deceived by the fallen ones, if you believe that fallen ones came here and did any deception, they deceived the kings of the earth, according to Psalms 2 and 2. And if we was the kings and queens of the earth in the beginning, then we was the ones got deceived first. That's why you see on the pharaonic headdress, and that will be the thumbnail. You game goofy. On the pharaoh headdress, you see the cobra at the top, the uchat, the uchit, the vachit, whatever you want to call it. You see the snake, the serpent, to represent coming out, controlling your third eye, is the serpentine thinking, or the reptilian brain thinking, R-type thinking, they call it in psychology. I, me first, my role in society, that's reptilian brain thinking. And if you think as a man thinketh, so shall he be. That's why so many of y'all tune in so much to that reptilian brain thinking that you become snake-like yourselves in a variety of ways. This is heavyweight jamming. I must say so myself. So the it's ours, so it's good, black pride and black supremacy lie. That's the Luciferian lie, that knowledge is supreme. What's Kara's one name mean? Knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone. He's in it too. And he's a walking contradiction in and of himself. And I heard some things about him in the Bronx, getting that work through the Bronx. That's right, Mr. Self-Destruction was the man. See, one thing about living in Detroit, you find out about what's going on in the dope world if you know the right people. Yep, KRS-One. Please believe it. Hear me now, believe me later. An inner space journey. That's what Follow the Leader was. Rappers and the songwriter's secret. Can the spirits inspire or write the flow? The same way they can inspire the hooks of songs and the verses of songs. Then, if so, I submit for you, Follow the Leader, which was an inner space journey. People used to fight when it came on. I remember that. There was energy behind it. From the cradle to the grave, triple stage darkness, third eye make me shine like jewelry, showing and proving, knowledge born, all about self-deification. rapping as a god. You all right? And that's normal for 5%ers, gods and earths. That's normal philosophy. So was it he who was speaking as a god, or the spirit inside of him as the alter ego, Ra, of Kemet? You find in the song Resurrection lyrics Pharaoh-like imagery. Why was it a tape he wasn't supposed to break? Who told him he couldn't break it at that time? What powers were over him to decide, well, this tape, this album, these rhymes are on such a level, you should let these out until a particular time. He said this was a tape I wasn't supposed to break. I was supposed to wait, but let's motivate. And remember the annoying scratch on one of them songs. I believe it was Eric B's scratching song on Follow the Leader album. The annoying scratch of Bob Marley saying, God is a living man. So they were deeply in the deception that man could make himself God by way of knowledge, which is the Luciferian lie. 101. One and done. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. After this, after you digest this, maybe watch it again, you'll be able to hear something different in Dead Prez, bigger than hip-hop. You'll be able to hear it with new ears. The same way after we talked about the songwriter's secret in the R&B and the funk, you can now hear those songs with new ears. By the time this is done, in the name of the Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah, called in tones today, you will be able to hear with new ears. You'll be able to peep game. You'll hear the controlled opposition behind Dead Prez. And you wonder why they named themselves such a thing and then represent a conscious group and they name themselves after money. Don't let the beat carry you away. Observe every word. And that's the word for the day. So I thank you again for having patience with my mouth. And I hope that this was a blessing to somebody by breaking through the chain. It helped to break through my chain. Because I no longer have any unnatural or unreasonable attachment to the music. That nostalgia, that romanticizing, that idolizing is broken. In the name of the Messiah, by the will of Ahaya, Yahweh. And so we call it done. And we thank you so much for allowing yourself to take that little trip with us. You followed me into a solo, and I was glad that we got into the flow. And we broke that down for show. So again, this is Unplug 'em, representing for my Master and my Lord and my Savior, known in these days and times in the tones of Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua HaMashiach, and by the will of the Creator, the Almighty I Am that I Am, Ahaya, Yahweh, and representing the humble city of Detroit, Michigan. I'm out of here. Peace.